The Bracken stood awake over the corpse of his mate. Her wounds were numerous, and the blood-caked walls and broken furniture told the tale of a violent story. Her wounds were deep. The Bracken's clawed hand gently rubbed down her arm as he inspected them. Looking to his right, the metal shells were covered in a yellow, slimy liquid and black shell pieces. For killing everything the Bracken cared for, he would have his revenge. Yes, the moon was dangerous, survival of the fittest and all that. He should not care for this. This wasn't his first partner. And yet he did. Simply because it was the middle of mating season. Brackens, both male and female, weren't fertile most of the time. Not to mention, on assurance, there weren't that many Brackens to begin with, which made the chance of him finding a new suitable partner before mating season was at an end. That was impossible. Even if he was among the strongest of his kin. And whatever killed his mate would pay dearly for this mistake. He'd kill everything that entered his nest, and everything else that was already crawling within. Heaving out of his mouth, the enraged Bracken stood up, stretching his body, filing his claws on the hard concrete floor, his muscles straining beneath his skin, making every step he took sound like tearing leather. Steam emanating from the monster, as a new hunger had awoken within him. You hummed a cheerful work tune that had been given the green light by the company, as you were collecting scrap. Sure, the job was terribly paid, incredibly dangerous, and not to mention the environment suits employees were required to wear reeked. But it was a simple job, and you liked that a lot. Thinking never really was your strong suit. You picked up a heavy engine block, your environment suit activating the little bit of weight relief systems it had. What a cheap piece of crap. You could still feel it in your knees. But it was good scrap. Only an idiot would leave it behind. Sadly, as you walked back through the metal corridors, you took the wrong turn. It was left and then right, and not right and then left. Due to everything in the facility looking the same, it took you until you entered a large, cavernous conveyor room that you haven't seen before to realize that you're lost. Oh no, you said out loud. With a pounding, frightful heart, you looked behind yourself. There was a chance you could come across a fire exit, and it may even be closer than the exit. Well, that had become your only hope now. The lifeline you'd hold on to. Still, with the heavy machinery in your arms, you pressed forward. And yet, it wasn't long until you stopped. You had entered a long, dark hallway, covered in torn spider webs? Torn? Of course, you knew of bunker spiders. Filthy, oversized spider aliens that nested in particularly moist sections, primarily in factories. As the name suggested, but these webs, they were usually well maintained. Was another human here? Were you not the first to enter? The wildlife on the moons usually ignored one another, unless absolutely necessary, simply because the company just threw so many humans into the meat grinder. So there was a chance something else was here too. Something aggressive enough to attack other monsters. You gulped and chose to quickly leave the facility to the fire exit once you found it. The uneasy feeling in your gut, however, became worse and worse as you took step after step. The area you had come from seemed so peaceful at first. There was merely one turret controlled by a rogue AI, and 2 beeping mines that were easily dodged. But this was something new entirely. The walls were covered in various colorful liquids, mostly the green of bunker spider blood. But then you entered a large concrete room, and you almost dropped the engine as you realized this really was no longer worth it. But just at the other end of this room, there was the exit. You just had to walk through the mess that was here. At the center of the room were the torn corpses of dead bunker spiders. In one corner stood a blood-covered nutcracker animatronic, the alien residing in its head only a mere bloody chunk in the machine's mouth. The robot's shotgun was destroyed on the ground in front of it. But what was most horrifying of all, that seemed so unremarkable, were the broken pieces of rock and rebar that seemed to change their angles on the floor whenever you blinked, indicating a dead coil head. Whatever happened here, whatever did this, was strong enough to destroy one of the animated statues, to the point where it was nothing but rubble. You gulped. You wanted to be anywhere else but here. Carefully stepping around the moving rocks and pools of blood. But just a single blink of your eyes was enough for one of the rocks to roll under one of your feet. Immediately you fell forward, loudly crashing onto the ground, your chest landing on the engine. You coughed as air was pressed out of your lungs, and you felt a tear run down your cheek from the pain and fear that you were feeling. Looking around yourself, you barely caught movement. "Screw this!" you huffed, panicking. Leaving the engine behind, you ran the last few meters towards the fire exit. But as you turned around to slam the door shut, you came face to face with a Bracken. The rust-colored monstrosity had its lipless mouth open into a silent scream of utter rage. And you could hear its heavy body hit the ground behind the door as it was hit in the face as you slammed it shut. Adrenaline was now flooding your body, taking 2 steps away from the door before turning to run. But that's when the Bracken did something unexpected. It left its nest. As you were sprinting towards your ship, you heard noises of sharp claws tearing through metal, the fire exit door being nothing but a cut of thin metal sheet to the monster, cracking it with its claws like a tin can opener. Looking at the beast did nothing as you turned around for a glimpse. Bracken saw direct eye contact as a show of superiority, something that worked only briefly, usually, but it seemed this one was too enraged. You jumped down a steep cliff, The monster closely behind you. You could hear it running. Normally you didn't hear Brackens. Oh god, this was so frightening. It was moving so fluidly and calculated. It made you feel worthless and pathetic. But just there was your ship. With all your strength, you clawed at the platform, just barely managing to crawl on top of it, and quickly slipping into your ship, pulling the autopilot lever to enter orbit. The moment your ship took flight and you heard the heavy metal doors close behind you, you slid down the console on your knees. You were heaving, heart pounding. Your life had flashed before your eyes when you slid down that cliff. Your suit was covered with dirt, and your visor was quickly turning white from the condensation of your breaths. After you felt your heartbeat go down to a manageable degree, where you didn't feel dizzy, you took hold of the lock of your helmet and screwed it open, taking it off and sighing loudly. You felt the coolness of your ship and took an exhausted, deep breath. You had almost missed the hospital-like sterile air of it. But then you made an uncomfortable noise. There was a different smell here as well, other than your sweat and the ship's clinical scent. The Bracken's head tilted to the side as he watched the human remove the shell on its head. Of course he had tasted human before. A rubbery skin hiding soft, tender meat that tasted more delicious than anything he had ever eaten before. He wasn't sure how to feel about this. But then a musk hit his nostrils. A feminine musk. The sharp blades on his back twitched in delight. It could only be the human's smell. So similar to that of Bracken females, it was just sweeter, yet also more subtle and gentler. It was way more tempting. His mouth dripped with salvia, no longer because of hunger and the need to kill everything in sight. No. You didn't know it yet, because you haven't turned around yet. But you just saved this Bracken's mating season. He was so glad he took care of all the things dangerous in his nest. They could have harmed you after all, harmed you like his former mate. The Bracken took a step forward, a loud and heavy thud. The doors behind him had closed. They didn't seem to open anymore. The ship was in the air, close to orbit. A tin can in space. Though the Bracken didn't understand the concept of space and the vacuum outside, he understood that these metal coffins were where humans came from, and judging by the decoration, also where they lived. The nightmarish realization that the Bracken had entered your ship just as you had pulled the lever manifested as the greatest stomach pangs you had ever experienced, and a dizzying feeling in your head. With twitching eyes, you turned around to stare at the alien. The Bracken was tall, taller than any Bracken you had encountered before. Its body, or judging by what was between its legs, a better word would be his body. His body was so muscular. There probably wasn't a single ounce of fat on him. Beneath his rust-colored skin, you could make out the heavy muscles move, like a bodybuilder at his peak. And yet still he maintained the silhouette of a regular person. You knew from data entries that the Bracken species really was just muscle, organs, and claws. But this one was on another level. Like a sort of alpha Bracken. His mouth was wide open, revealing 2 rows of shark-like teeth. Its heavy feet took another step. Your mouth twitched as you tried to move as little as possible. A bubble of frightful snot popped out of your nose as tears ran down your face. The Bracken took another step. He was taking his sweet time. There was no way you could beat him. Though there still was the eject button. And if he was trying to take his time, you could free the universe of this monster in exchange for your own life. But as you reached for the button, you made the mistake of breaking eye contact for but a second. The giant clawed hand of the Bracken slapped you in the face, his fingers wrapping around your head as he held you up. You struggled in the monster's grasp, and your hands firmly clasped his wrist as you fought it. Of course, he didn't budge. Of course, you weren't strong enough to do anything. The Bracken tilted his head curiously. He didn't understand humans yet. But if you could remove the shell around your head, maybe you could remove the layer of gross orange skin without causing immediate death. Licking his lips, his other claw ripped at your environment suit, tearing it apart, revealing the soft skin beneath. Only once or twice it broke your skin, causing shallow bleeding wounds. You screamed into his palm in pain, but now, as the Bracken looked at your real skin, his eyes widened. Yes, you indeed were a female. And what a female. Plump, fatty flesh that wiggled in front of him. Quickly and needy, he slammed you on the ground. You gasped in pain and coughed, almost having bitten off your tongue. The Bracken pinned you down by your shoulders, his face coming close to yours, staring right into your eyes. Now that was superiority. The thin line of his mouth widened as he opened it once again, showing off his fangs, before a long, black tongue shot out like a snake. It curiously licked over your skin. The Bracken was tasting you. It was salty, soft, tender, and gentle. Nothing like the hard muscles and taste of rust other Brackens had. Humans were delicious. But then, one of his claws violently grabbed your chest. Your haunted-looking face focused on the perverted alien's actions. This removed any doubt you still had. The Bracken pressed his mouth onto yours, tongue pushing down into your gullet. You retched and almost vomited into the Bracken's mouth. Well, the least you could take from this was that Brackens understood the concept of a romantic kiss, as brutal and painful as it was. But that was mostly because he didn't understand how your body worked yet. But as you felt something large, hard, and hot slap onto your chest, you realized there would be plenty of time for the monster to learn just how to make humans squeal.
Thank you to the people who are supporting me on Ko-fi. You guys are keeping me alive.
Special thanks to my little darling members: D's Nuts, Nicodemus D, Cat Cove, Kea Abyss, Bit, Zings X3, Melufia, Lavender Cheese, Muffin, A Simp, Hella, Nexrist, AJ Anime Girl, and Hopeful. Your support is greatly appreciated, and thank you very much for your kindness.